Hello and welcome to Quatrina on News, where we decode, you decide. And decoding this information warfare that is going on between the United States, Iran, and every other player in the field gets a little complicated. So we're going to try and break it down for you nice and easy. First of all, it's been an interesting couple of days, like I keep saying. Everything moves so fast. On Sunday, President Trump posted on Truth Social that he was launching Project Freedom, which was going to be a humanitarian mission to rescue the stranded 1,000+ ships and 20,000+ mariners who are still stranded in the Persian Gulf since the war started, which has literally been 2 months ago. And on Monday, all of a sudden, there were missile and drone strikes on the United Arab Emirates, particularly on the oil terminal in Fujairah and a couple of other locations. Everybody assumed it was Iran. Iran suddenly popped up and said it wasn't them. Their military headquarters has said it's not them. But the whole world says it's Iran. Okay. On Tuesday, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says that the war is now a defensive war, that the American naval forces in the Gulf will respond if shot at. Shortly after that, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is standing in for Carolyn Leavitt, the White House spokeswoman, but in effect, he's also the U.S. Secretary of State, so his words carry the weight of the State Department and the White House. And he says Operation Epic Fury is over. Okay, the war is over? Like, over? Okay, we are going to have to take him at his word for that. And then he said Project Freedom, which Trump had tweeted about on Sunday, will be the new way going forward. Okay, so no hostilities, nothing's going to happen, just Project Freedom, which has its own concerns because swanning into the Strait of Hormuz and trying to take commercial shipping out of there without Iran's buy-in was never going to be easy. Well, something happened. We can only speculate on what, but there are reports that Iran fired on a U.S. destroyer. The Pentagon says it didn't hit. Finally, everybody seems to have agreed on warning shots were fired. And then we get reports of either one or maybe two U.S. Strato tankers, which are these huge refueling planes that mid-air refuel American jet fighters. One of those suddenly goes missing after squawking on the channel 7700, which is a general internationally recognized call sign for distress. And then it disappears from the radar. Okay, maybe they switched their transponders off. It was near Qatar. It had taken off from the UAE. It didn't go back to the UAE as far as we can tell. It didn't land in Qatar as far as we can tell. Maybe they just switched their transponders off and landed somewhere. Maybe they didn't. Maybe something went horribly wrong and the plane crashed. Maybe Iran shot it down. You know something? We're never going to know. Because shortly after that, literally 3 hours after Marco Rubio has his press conference, White House briefing, telling the world that Project Freedom is going to go forward, President Trump pulls a U-turn. He's been hanging around Pakistani politicians too long because we excel at the art of the U-turn, and he's clearly learned a thing or two from Pakistani politicians. So President Trump says on Truth Social, based on the request of Pakistan and other countries, there has been a great military success, great progress has been made towards the complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran. The blockade remains in full force. Project Freedom is paused until the agreement is reached and signed. Okay, if you say so, because at this point, we really can't tell where policy is coming from. If it's going to change every 2 hours, every 3 hours, it's, to put it mildly, frustrating for those of us who are trying to decode what's happening. So let me try and put it into a wider field for you, because that's not the only thing that's been happening in the region. A very significant visit also took place yesterday and continued till today, and that was that the Iranian Foreign Minister, Dr. Abbas Araghchi, flew to China, and where he met with his counterpart, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang. And that is a very significant meeting for two reasons. Number one, Dr. Arakchi has already met with the Russian president, the Russian foreign minister, and pretty much gotten a buy-in from Russia. The other global power watching the whole scenario right now is, of course, Beijing. And Beijing has kept a very quiet, low-key, circumspect role in all of this. They have criticized US and Israeli actions as being illegitimate, but have really kept reasonably quiet on the whole thing. Now, you have to remember, Beijing gets upwards of 90% of its oil from Iran. So Iran is an extremely important partner for them. And a continued standoff against the Strait of Hormuz, the US blockade on Iranian ships, is really very, very frustrating, probably, for the Chinese, and I use that word mildly. And what we have is that right before the meeting, the Chinese foreign minister said, "We believe that a comprehensive ceasefire brooks no delay." So get the ceasefire, get it secured, not this tenuous, vacuous, changing, floating agreement. A resumption of hostilities is inadvisable, and persisting with negotiations is particularly important. That is China saying, sit down and talk, quit fighting, plain and simple. And that is a reasonably strong statement coming from China at this point. But Prime Minister Arakchi also put out another statement. He actually tweeted in Chinese, where he said that regional peace and stability is what is on the agenda, and Iran appreciates the 4-point agenda that was presented by China. We're not too sure what those 4 points are, but I would assume that they pretty much come to the point of talk it out, sign an agreement, get the Strait of Hormuz reopened, and the hostilities have to stop. Now, what exactly are we going to make of it? Arakchi even talks about a new post-war architecture for security and development in the region. If you look at all these disparate statements and what's happening, several things are now coming to light. One of the points that is being discussed over and over again, Trump has said this as well, as have other people in the region, that there is some talk of a one-page document that will be signed between Iran and the United States after discussions and negotiations. 1 page. Previous agreements have gone on to dozens of pages. So we can assume that a 1-page document is going to be pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and I highly doubt that it's going to touch the nuclear issue. It's probably going to focus entirely on the Strait of Hormuz, reopening the waterway to international traffic, and possibly, just possibly, Iran may put in a demand for a commitment from the United States for no war. Iran is still very, very wary. In fact, Iran's ambassador to Pakistan tweeted today, once beaten, twice shy. Perhaps he meant once bitten. But yeah, Iran took a hammering last year when they were in the middle of negotiations and Israel attacked, and then the US joined in and they attacked Iran's nuclear facilities. And this year, again, negotiations were underway when this massive war began on February 28th. So Iran's foreign office spokesman, and he is a key member of the entire apparatus, and he had a very interesting statement today on X. He says, negotiations are an attempt to engage in discussions to resolve disputes. This needs good faith. This is not a disputation, dictation, deception, extortion, or coercion. So you can see that Iran is still hedging its bets, because while they probably appreciate what has been done so far, they did have a bad experience at the Islamabad talks. Even though those were 21-hour-long talks, first time since 1979 that Iran and the United States at a high level sat down in the same room. That is huge. I mean, we cannot dismiss that that process happened. The talks didn't go anywhere. In fact, things got a little bit worse. But, and here's a huge but, we still haven't heard from the Americans what made them decide to walk out of the talks. I mean, that weekend, I think all of us were glued to what was happening, and we thought that the talks were going to continue on Sunday. The talks that started on Saturday was expected to continue until Sunday. An announcement to that effect had come out. But US President J.D. Vance, very late at night, I think it was like 2:30 Pakistan time, 2:30 a.m. Pakistan time, suddenly has a press conference, literally 2 minutes, in which he says, We couldn't reach agreement, and we're going home. But left the door open for further negotiations. And after that, things kind of went up and down a little bit. But what we did see was that while things went up and down, hostilities would rise, rhetoric would rise, then calm down again, the key sticking points moved from Iran's nuclear facilities to the Strait of Hormuz, because that started to pinch not just the United States, but all of Europe. All of Europe started suffering, and it came to the point where people actually were asking and talking about the fact that why do things go haywire on the weekends and then improve on Monday or Tuesday? And a lot of people accuse the American administration of manipulating the market, oil prices. And I have to say that that is a really concerning topic. I mean, I have no clue. Other people have presented their arguments about how bets are made, or gambling goes on the results of what's going to happen in the oil market, the futures market. But war is not a game to be played on stock markets. War is a very real thing. And what has this war accomplished? Who has benefited? Who has lost? Well, we're going to talk all about this in a little bit more detail, so don't go anywhere. And do remember, if you haven't done so yet, to subscribe, hit the like button. If you like the video, do hit the bell icon so you're notified of any new videos coming up. And please share with everybody whom you think might be interested. Welcome back. We're going to take a look now at the larger scheme of things. Right now, the focus, of course, is going to be on ending this war and when negotiations are going to take place. What we do know is that throughout this entire past week, 10 days, while things have gone up and down, the negotiations via Pakistan have continued. Iran presented its 10-point proposal. The United States responded to that. Iran, as of today, has said that they are studying the U.S. proposal. But as I mentioned earlier, there's now discussion of a one-page agreement. What could that one page conceivably entail that would not require a lot of discussion and would be signed immediately? Well, I would assume that one immediate requirement would be for an end to the war. Iran has repeatedly said that it is unable to trust the United States, that they have been attacked before through negotiations. Plus, they have also repeatedly said that every time we talk, an attack happens, then everything is quiet, and then an attack happens again. So they are going to be seeking guarantees that there would be some kind of no-war pact, some kind of commitment from the United States that they will not attack Iran without any conditions. I mean, that has to be something that Iran is going to force. They've been talking about that consistently. The missing factor in that is going to be Israel, because Iran at this point can't let go of Lebanon. Lebanon has now unfortunately become the sideshow to what is happening in Iran, very much like Cambodia became the sideshow to Vietnam. And that is something that Iran is going to be concerned about, because the death toll in Lebanon is increasing every day. Hundreds of villages have been absolutely flattened, and Israeli forces continue their invasion into the south of Lebanon. And that is something that is not making the headlines, but is going to very much be on Iran's mind. So I don't know if that's going to come up, but more importantly, a no-war pact has to include a commitment from Israel. They cannot, Israel cannot unilaterally go ahead and attack Iran without America being there or not. I mean, they have to specify that, because otherwise it's going to go back to square one, like last year, where Israel attacked first and then America joined in. The U.S. is going to be demanding a complete opening of the Strait of Hormuz. That is actually, as we have said repeatedly, the main sticking factor between the whole situation right now. The world is focused on the Strait of Hormuz right now, which saddens me in a way, because it's about oil, not about human lives. But that's me. But I would rather see a resolution without further bloodshed. I think we all would. But I do understand that the global economy has been severely impacted by what has been happening. And it's not just the US that is suffering. It's not just Asia that's suffering. We're suffering here in Pakistan too. India is suffering. Southeast Asia is suffering. And the United States is seeing higher gasoline prices. And the blowback is also there in Europe. And it's not just gasoline, it's fertilizer, it's natural gas. All of it is held up. And that is, if it continues, could, or I should say would, lead to a global recession. And US President Donald Trump cannot afford that right now. It is imperative for him to get oil and fertilizer and gas flowing again from the Strait of Hormuz because he's facing a very, very rough midterm election coming up in November. And the primaries are going to be starting, I think, in September. So he's running out of time here. Plus, he has to go to Beijing in the coming week. I think it's the 15th of May that he's supposed to be there. And he's going to want to have a signed deal before he goes there so that he can focus with the Chinese president on issues that pertain directly to China and the United States and not have them focus on Iran. So everybody has an agenda here. Fair enough. But one has to think, what has this war really accomplished? Let's take a look at what the United States was saying before the war started. Let me remind you that talks are going on in Geneva between Iran, the United States, represented by Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner. Iran was represented by Dr. Araghchi and his other team leaders. And those talks were reported to be going pretty well until they weren't. So on the 26th, they think the talks are going pretty well. The interlocutor, which was the Omani foreign minister, made a public statement saying that the talks are going very well and they hope to reach an agreement. And less than 48 hours later, Iran and the United States attacked Iran with full force. And they killed the supreme leader of Iran, which is something that Iran is not going to forget. Let me remind you that Iran took massive losses last year and this year. Last year, they lost the commander-in-chief of the IRGC. In February, they lost his replacement. The defense minister was also killed. But something that Iran will never, ever, ever let go of, and I totally stand by them on this one, the savage, unnecessary murder of 168 teachers and children at the Menab school. That was a mistake. Acknowledge it. Apologize. Do something, for God's sake. The US has kept silent. It is still under investigation. Iran now has the phrase Menab 168 painted on the plane that the foreign minister uses to travel to all his meetings, constantly reminding the world that they suffered a grievous and tragic loss. More people have died in Iran, in the United Arab Emirates, in other countries, and of course in Lebanon. So the human cost of this war has been tremendous. Well, where did the US start out? They haven't really been specific about what they wanted. It was always supposed to be about the nuclear weapons. That hasn't gone so well. They didn't manage to acquire regime change. They killed the senior leadership of Iran, but Iran's government system just moved swiftly and brought in new leaders to replace the ones who had been martyred. No nuclear deal. No limits to ballistic missiles. These are all things that were supposed to be achieved by the United States. No limits to Iran funding its allies in Lebanon or in Yemen or in Palestine. So that discussion seems to have dropped by the side. What else? The Strait of Hormuz, wide open on the 26th of Feb. Now putting the whole world into crisis. Iran, by the way, says ships are free to come and go as long as they follow the path we give them. Because remember, Iran mined the Strait of Hormuz. And so they are the only ones who know what is a safe passage. But President Trump's blockade adds another layer where no ships can leave Iranian ports. No Iranian ships can leave the Strait of Hormuz. So unless both sides simultaneously change their positions on the Strait of Hormuz, this crisis isn't going anywhere. What else has the US achieved? Well, 18 of its very expensive bases have been utterly destroyed in the region, including particularly in the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. US alliances are weaker now than they were before the Greenland debacle, because Europe made some right noises, made some murmurs, and hawed, but didn't come to help the Americans. which would lead President Trump to explode on alternate days. We don't need anybody's help. We need their help. Why aren't they coming for us? Why are they coming to help us? It was just a really, really difficult scenario. But what we can generally all agree on is that Europe didn't come forward. Yeah, sure, a ship here or there, minesweeper here or there, but no tangible efforts on behalf of Europe or any of the other allies that the United States had. So the losses to the United States have been significant. Iran, sure, major losses. They have lost a lot of their missile capacity. They have lost a lot of people. They have lost that oil facility that they had in Tehran, which sent a black cloud all over Tehran, and we were fearful that it was going to come into Pakistan as well. That was a toxic cloud. We talked about acid rain. There have been damages. But Iran has potentially sustained or absorbed a lot of those because they have spent 47 years in isolation and under sanctions. So Iran is definitely going to be asking for sanctions to be lifted, for their assets to be unfrozen. What else can we squeeze in on one page? If President Trump thinks that he can get Iran to do anything that would help him claim a victory on the nuclear front, that would probably help him sell the deal. And the only way I see that happening is for Iran to reiterate and for President Trump to now accept that Iran will hand over its enriched uranium, which was enriched up to 60%, either to a third country, which could be Russia, it could be China, or it could be Pakistan, or they could agree to dilute it. But they're going to have to come up with something regarding that 60% enriched uranium. That would conceivably give President Trump the victory that he is seeking. This is not going to be resolved without Trump saying a victory. Unfortunately, personalities matter, and they matter a lot in what is happening. Iranian President Pezeshkian said something important today that perhaps non-Muslims might not understand, but I would appeal to you, if you are a non-Muslim, to try and understand. President Pezeshkian said, "We have surrendered to the Almighty, to Allah. We surrender to no one else." That is Iran in a nutshell. That is the belief in all Muslim countries. We believe that we surrender to the will of Allah. We don't rail against Allah. We are supposed to accept everything Allah sends our way, good or bad. So we surrender our will. For President Pezeshkian to use that and say, we surrender only to Allah and no one else, if President Trump is hoping for some kind of surrender document from Iran, I don't think he's going to get it. But what he would probably be happy with is anything that he can count as a victory. The key point underlining all of this, can he control Israel? We'll be keeping an eye on events for the next couple of days. If something major happens, we'll of course come online sooner and give you all the updates. For now, it's Quatrina from Pakistan.